it live.
We're doing it live. Welcome to
Not the
I've Never Read
success sign
Discworld.
at the end. Oh, right. Okay. We're already talking over one another.
It's going great. It's a very peculiar, slightly special episode of I've Never Read Discworld with
I've
myself,
got a
PJ Hart, and
bossy chair. I'm Andy Luke. I feel like I'm in my pajamas for this podcast. We
he's wearing his Death of Rats t-shirt. Should point out. I'm sure there hopefully are some listeners out there who sleep in a Death of Rats t-shirt. I think that's an aspirational mode of sleeping for sure. So it's been a
laugh and go
hell.
on, but that doesn't mean it'll be professional in any way.
He's in his rocking chair, looking very professional, which is quite apt for the story that we're going to talk about this month. And we are talking about a story rather than a book, aren't we,
Yeah,
Andy?
yeah, we're going short. We are looking at The Sea and the Little Fishes, um, which it comes from a phrase. I don't know. Do we want to go straight into it?
I think we could talk a little bit about where it sits, possibly in the canon of Discworld. So as hopefully everybody knows by now, we're doing this pretty much exclusively in publication order for the reason that Andy hasn't read them before and he's extremely spoiler phobic. So where the kind of short fiction falls into that has been kind of an interesting question, not least because I haven't really read any of it either. So we're kind of approaching the halfway point of the series, and we also wanted to kick the tires a little bit because we want to do Hogfather at Christmas, obviously. So we thought we would take this month and just check in and see like what else is out there at this period of Discworld. So where we are, which is in between Feet of Clay and Hogfather. A few short stories were kind of out in the world by this point, appeared in various places that Andy will tell us about in a moment. So we decided to pick a couple that had been published to this date and look at them, starting with this one for no other reason than I haven't done all the prep for the other one that we were going to look at, basically. So, Andy, do you want to tell us a little bit about The Sea and Little Fishes, where it was published and all that kind of stuff? Or
Came out of Bob Silverberg's Legends anthology. I think it actually dates to like a book or two ahead of where we're at.
1998? I thought that was about right, but maybe I'm wrong.
There doesn't appear to be any spoilers. We have a brief appearance of Agnes Nitt. It's a witch's story, focusing mostly on Granny and Nanny. Agnes appears very briefly, so I don't know if she's going to join the triumvirate or make the triumvirate, or if there's been no mention of the Queen.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, right. No, you're correct. Yeah, so Fate of Clay, June 1996. Yes, this is a couple of years later, as you correctly surmise. So our sort of reason for doing this is a little bit askew, perhaps, but I think we're in the right kind of ballpark. This kind of mid to late 90s era of Discworld is a great one. We spent a lot of time with the witches, and especially in terms of where the series goes, which we'll not say too much in front of Andy. It's been quite a joy actually to go back and get a bit more witches for me. But I mean, in many ways, the story wasn't at all what I was expecting from a Granny Weatherwax centric story.
It's quite a fun little number, and it's a lovely size. And there's a deleted scene which we'll talk about in a while, which I absolutely love, absolutely adore. But it's a very different tone. I think it kind of works best as a deleted scene because the story as we have it is quite tight, it's quite neat. I think it's about 60 pages or so, which means it's the longest short story in the Discworld verse.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out that Andy is gesticulating with a hard copy book that he's been reading his short stories from. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that collection while you're holding it in your hands and showing?
Yeah, this has been a bit of a treat. This is a blink of the screen, which is collecting a lot of Pratchett's or maybe all of his fiction shorts. I think it's the last 130 odd pages or Discworld stories. I did take having the luxury of a shorter reading requirement for this episode and a bit more time to fill there. I did go and read some of Terry's earlier shorts. There's some wonderful pieces. They're like a 1 or 2 pages, which worked really well for all the length of them. There's a forerunner to the naming of Rincewind and Rince Mangled the Gnome, which is also like a rough first try at truckers, the Bromeliad trilogy.
Yep. Yeah, that's it. Nailed it. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I've got an electronic version of the same book. I haven't had a chance to dip around in it much yet, but have read a few of the other shorter fictional work that I tried reading with my kids. It was a collection of the newspaper stories with dragons on the cover. I remember that much. It was a bit hit or miss for them. They were quite young at the time, but I loved them obviously. So I'm looking forward to maybe circling back and revisiting those. But yeah, I suppose maybe before we get into the story proper, just about that kind of halfway point that we've reached ish. How are you feeling about the series as a whole? I mean, I guess you maybe the fact that you're like voraciously hoovering up now like other short stories and stuff, I think maybe already gives the readers or the listeners who are hopefully also readers, a bit of a clue. But do you want to say anything more about that? Or
Yeah, yeah, I think it speaks to that it has been worked up such enthusiasm for Terry as a writer that I couldn't help myself. We could have. I mean, that's a whole other filler episode gone with what I've already read. Um, we've talked about me feeling a bit sort of tired, and the whole sort of being watched, being listened to, and the obligations of doing this as a podcast. And so, a book every month has been of the same author in the same world. There's been a little bit hard going at times. Obviously, such a brilliant author, such a brilliant world, and that's kind of made it, yeah, survival. That's a joy to read.
yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Certainly, even in terms of my reread, and it's of the series I have a lot of enthusiasm for. I would say that once we get past this midway point that's kind of coming up, so the next book's book 20, there's 41 books in total, so we actually haven't quite reached the midway point, but we're pretty much there. There is a bit more variety coming. Not that the series isn't varied
Plenty variety
so
there.
far, but there's more variety. I think the scope of the subject matter widens. Certainly by the time we get to like book 25, I would say.
Okay.
So yeah, so there's some books coming up that I'm really, really looking forward to. In fact, I think that the next run of three, Hogfather, Jingo, The Last Continent, are all, or no, sorry, Hogfather, Jingo for sure, The Last Continent, good, Carpe Jugulum, very much looking forward to. And then, yeah, I don't want to spoil too much. We're meant to be talking about what we've read so far. I'm looking ahead. So obviously I am excited.
And we have had so much variety. Well, variety in terms of stories. We've had this last 10, we've had a lot of the same sort of characters, guards, witches, Rincewind. And looking back, Small God seems like a bit of an outlier in terms of,
Yeah,
because there's been
it
no
is.
regular characters there.
Yeah, small gods, pyramids, I guess to an extent. There are still stand-alone books in there, but I think what's kind of crazy to consider, without giving too much away, is that like we're on book, we just finished book 19. We're about to start book 20, and some of the continuing series that exist to the right through to the end haven't even started yet.
Right.
So like so you know that there's going to be there's new protagonists to come and stuff like that, and a lot more in terms of theme, a lot wider kind of themes, I think. So yeah, it's exciting stuff, but for that reason as well, I think it's nice for me especially to kind of revisit, or not revisit, well, no, yes, to revisit Granny and the witches as characters with this story that I never read before.
I'm
So
quite excited about looking for the social systems and the discovering the new continents. I mean, we got a, I think we probably get the first absolutely brilliant Rincewind story in Interesting Times, which showed us a whole new geographical region.
Mm,
So I'm
mm,
really excited about that coming up and bringing my sort of sociology or humanities student into
yeah.
this that are laid out in front of us. That's going to be exciting. But yeah, absolutely, we breather like this in the next episode are
Yeah.
they're going to help me appreciate what's to come more. Um,
Oh, for sure. I mean, this, I don't think it's much of a spoiler to say that Discworld as a series gets a lot more sociological in the back end, in the back half of the series, you know.
you
So,
know, I'm just remembering a metaphor from the early ones. It's a bit like reading this at the time, and I guess this must have been a metaphor for Terry, the Octavo, back in book one, Rincewind trying to keep this in his head. It's probably quite likely a metaphor for Terry trying to write this. And with the rapid schedule we've been doing those at, it can be a bit like that for me as well.
yeah, for sure. You can't keep it all in because it's coming at you so fast. And there is a lot to think about. And that's been great for me on a reread because some of these books I haven't read more than once and I haven't read more than once for a really long time. But yeah, the flip side of that is I guess it's been quite sad in some ways because I've been reading Rob's book alongside the last few books. I've actually been reading it pretty much all year slowly. Probably for the same reason finished reading the Discworld series slowly, and I finally got to the point in the book where like the dementia is is relatively advanced, and Terry's life's become quite limited, and it's genuinely bittersweet. Well, it's not even sweet; it's just a genuinely sad read, you know. So reading that alongside, for me, an undiscovered Granny Weatherwax story, kind of at the same time, was really quite bittersweet. But changed the texture of it maybe for me as well. I mean, we should probably just get into it. I mean, it's a very different witch's story, isn't it? It
Yeah,
presents.
I think Terry made up like this saying: the big sea does not care which way the little fishes swim. That idea of being too small to make a difference. J. Michael Straczynski did the same thing in Babylon 5. That the avalanche has started, the pebbles don't get the vote. Ah, I can see my reflection in it.
Yeah, speaking of J. Michael Straczynski, for those who are just on audio, I just left the room to return with my copy of the complete book of script writing by J. Michael Straczynski. So
I have
actually,
the
I haven't opened
hard
that.
copy original of that, unless that's his new one that he brought out last.
No, no, my supervisor gave me this. It was off the shelf in the university, so it's probably ancient. Yeah, the latest date on the inside of this is 97, so I think it's a second edition. So there you go. Yeah, so I mean, I think, yeah, Straczynski, Pratchett, like you're talking about, there's writers who understand, both writers who understand that like these genres, sci-fi and fantasy, like they have the potential to be epic, but it's like it's the small stories and the character-driven stories within those epic settings that really make them special. And this story is a really good example of
Yeah.
that for sure.
So we haven't written down a synopsis. So I guess I could improv this.
Sure.
And feel free to jump in and help me out, PJ.
I'll definitely make it worse, but yeah.
There are to be witches' trials in Lancre. Granny is to expert and is asked by three senior witches to take a pass. And so, after much foot dragging, she does and makes things absolutely lovely and nice for everyone, which freaks everyone out. And after being freaked out and causing more problems, they come to their senses of a sort, and Granny makes a massive bonfire, and everyone is happy.
Yeah, that's how I remember it, certainly. Um, I mean, a very Terry Pratchett idea, the idea of, obviously witch trials in the historical context of people accused of being witches put on trial is turned on its head here. And I'm curious to know if he's the first, be surprised if he was the first writer to kind of come up with this idea of a witch trial as like a trial of their abilities rather than like a legal trial that they've been subjected to. Because it occurred to me, was watching Agatha all along. Have you been watching that?
I haven't.
No, so yeah, new Disney Plus Marvel series about Agatha Harkness, and there's a very similar conceit going on in that series, which may or may not be lifted from the comics. I'm not sure. Where a coven of witches subject themselves to a series of trials in order to, gain more power or whatever. Spoilers for anybody who hasn't watched any Agatha yet. But that idea of a witch trial being something that witches willingly subject themselves to rather than something that they are being subjected to by puritanical, patriarchal authority figures is an interesting one, sort of flipping the whole idea on its head. And it certainly feels to me like a very Terry Pratchett thing. But since I've recently also seen it in other media, I'm curious to know if that is
Yeah,
kind of an original.
it has a whole sort of sports day fun fair kind of element to it. There is a quote just popped into my head from this. There is no such thing as a coven of witches. It's a small war.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Yeah, that, yeah.
character dynamics.
And the Terry Pratchett version, the Discworld version of it, is obviously very different from the Marvel Cinematic Universe
Yeah.
version of it, which is currently on TV screens. Yeah, like you said, it's a bit more like a village fete or a school sports day, where everybody comes together and there's a committee. And I know you were winging it. You said in your kind of synopsis, it's a group of senior witches who confront Granny, but I mean, it's not. It's just the witches who are willing to be on the committee, and we know there's a certain type of person, and I'm one of them. I'm
Right.
on I'm on a trade union committee, but like the people on the committees aren't necessarily like the most. The people who have time to be on the committees aren't certainly always the most proficient at their craft. I would certainly put myself in that
Yeah,
as
I
a.
think Ronnie or Nanny make a comment at that they're better at being witches managers for the trials than they are at being witches.
Actual witches, yeah. So
They're
I think the
failed at being witches, so that this is why they're doing it instead.
yeah, for sure. And the fact that, I mean, another tremendous character name, and I assume it just has to be pronounced lettuce. Otherwise, what's the point? Lettuce Earwig. That's a great name. And she embodies everything that we just described. And it goes without saying, no surprise at all that Granny Weatherwax is the undisputed champion of the witch trials. And as a position, as an opening gambit, that feels like a really interesting place to start, because we also, from everything that we know about Granny, like we've read all these books, she's not gonna give up. She's like, we know, surely, like everything we know about Granny tells us that she will never back down. So then how do we feel when she does, I guess, is the next sort of big question, isn't it? Or is
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
She's just so stubborn, and that we have that setup that Granny is the undisputed champion before we even, get into the event. We kind of know that. That's kind of been earned. Really, it's a very light sort of story. It's a very sort of easygoing kind of thing. There's a line I selected. Nanny is trying to talk to Granny about what she plans to do about this. She's she's sure that Granny, having dropped out, is planning some kind of revenge, basically.
Yeah.
And the line is, yeah, well, you had that look just before old Hoggart was found beaten black and blue in his own pigsty and wouldn't talk about it. You mean old Hoggart, the wife beater, or old Hoggart who would lift his hand to a woman no more, said Granny. The thing her lips had burst into may have been called a smile. And it's just a moment of utter justice and horror at one, and another confirmation that Granny just has this incredible power that she
Yeah.
was upon.
Yeah, it's clever as well, because I think it's giving us like really clear examples in this short story, and especially if you just picked up this collection, I guess, and you didn't know a huge amount about Discworld or Granny Weatherwax, that she is absolutely not to be trifled with, you
Yeah,
know.
same words of
So,
mine.
but even for us as readers familiar with her, it serves as a great reminder of that, because we're about to see the flip side where she does actually decide to go along with the committee's request. And I know you're saying it's quite an easy read, and it is. But the longer it went on, and the more Granny seems to be genuinely trying to be nice, like the more uncomfortable it gets to read, you know? And that's the point. And that's it's not only Granny's point, I think it's Terry's point as well. So he's making us feel the same way that the other witches and the guests feel, because we're like, for us, the experienced readers are like, no, this isn't right. It feels really uncomfortable for Granny to be not Granny, you know? So I thought it was masterful in that sense, you know?
Yeah, I got that. And also, I never doubted her. I just had this. I don't know what I was imagining, but it was maybe something like how it played out.
Yeah, that, I mean, yes, no, it's not a criticism really by any stretch, because like you create a character as larger than life as Granny Weatherwax, there are only certain directions you can take them in as a result. But I think he sort of played this really well, and to its logical extreme, where like it's not that she was planning something, like everybody thought she was planning some elaborate prank or kind of trick or something, but just the fact that she wasn't doing that, it's the headology 101, just like just
Right.
the act of somebody like Granny being nice all the time is enough to upset the natural order of things and ruin it.
It's really fun watching Lancre society fall apart with this expectation of something that isn't happening. I mean, yeah, headology 101.
Yeah.
This is like what being a magician is. Like little children crying, um, the hair removal thing, or no, growing hair for your head, but it was poured on a dog instead. The dog's
Yeah, because they didn't trust it. Yeah, I mean, there's only one sort of moment where I think, because it needs a bit of jeopardy, I suppose, where like Nanny thinks that Granny has maybe hurt her grandson. Is it Pusey? Uh, and that's the kind of like, oh shit moment, I suppose, where like, and there's sort of two different ways to read it, maybe, where like all the characters are untrustworthy or untrusting of Granny because of everything they know about her, but then that sort of gives us as readers a moment to think, oh, maybe Nanny is right. Like if Nanny is scared of Granny, that Granny might do something, like we sort of have to believe it a little bit, don't we? Because we're kind of Nanny's that other character that kind of carries us along in these stories, like a co kind of POV character. So I think that's the only moment in it where I sort of felt there was like really significant jeopardy.
Yeah,
And
Nanny stuck between the worlds of Granny, you would trust, and the rest of Lancre. And she's always kind of, from what I've seen, right, of the opinion, been that character, the sort of the ambassador for Granny, and these kind of worlds seem to be dividing over the course of the narrative, and Nanny's legs are stretching a chasm.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like it all seems kind of fun and games. You know, Granny's acted a bit out of character. It's all fun and games until Nanny thinks that she might be willing to put a child in danger, and then it gets kind of serious. And I think that's the moment where you're like, oh, if they fall out and Granny is just committed to this being nice thing, like that's the end of the witches. And obviously, you know, it's not, but like considering it's such a short story, I think that level of jeopardy was quite high. The fact that like Nanny and Granny could fall out, Granny might essentially stop being the Granny that we know, felt like quite a lot of jeopardy for this otherwise quite light, short, self-contained story, you know. But I mean, I guess that's kind of the same thing that happens in all the witches' stories. Granny and Nanny are going to fall out, and then they don't, or whatever. But yeah,
There's the nice callbacks other, which is stuff like they talk about Lancre never being big enough for Granny, that she's always wanting to wanting distractions, and Nanny will find those distractions for her. We talk about the characters because there's a really small set of main cast who are all wonderfully fleshed out. Like Granny and Nanny we talked about, but the three uh, witches of what do we call them? The
the committee.
witches,
Yeah,
witches.
yeah.
Yeah. Mother Dismas, Lettuce.
Lettuce, earwig, and then the one that doesn't really do much.
So we've got one who's got this kind of Mrs. Kate kind of vibe that she's never in her temporality is not fixed. She's maybe 2 weeks.
Uh,
Right?
yep,
I
yeah.
thought that worked really well for this sort of small story. I found in Reaper Man when we had Mrs. Kate doing this, it got a bit irritating at times, but I think it works perfectly well here.
Yeah, it's a bit more carefully deployed here, I think.
The description of the three witches as they enter is it's a couple of pages of really fine character description and action to extend that.
Yeah, I'm wary of talking about it too at too much length just because it's potentially spoilerific. But those scenes amongst witches, like you said, he describes a group of witches as a war rather than as a coven, and he loves writing those kind of multi-witch scenes where there's like three or more witches and like their conflicting personalities and their conflicting goals and their conflicting approaches to achieving those goals. It's always really, really fun, even when it's just something like a committee meeting for what is essentially, as you say, a school sports day. you know, um, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of simmering conflict and tension within that scene, which is glorious.
And then we have Mr. Hotchcroft, who I love, who names his apples after Nanny Ogg. And at the
Yeah,
end of the story, what is it he names after Granny? Can you remember?
I want to say a turnip.
I think it's something like a turnip. At first, I thought it was going to be a cheese.
Could be,
It's
actually.
a very useful vegetable, the onion. She said,
Ah, onion, yeah.
sharp.
Turnip. Close. I don't know why. Yeah, turnips. It's nearly Halloween. Got, you know, turnips on the
Actually,
brain.
an onion seems it seemed a little sort of an element of the insult when I first read it, but now I think about it, onions, Granny Weatherwax approves of onions, I think.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. There's not much you can cook without an onion. So no, I think that was apt, and it's interesting that that is how it all starts. That little kind of underlying sense of competitiveness between Granny and Nanny that has certainly was there in Masquerade anyway, and the fact that the story is ultimately going to be about competition between witches is a nice way to start it. And just that reminder that even though Granny is the most all-powerful witch and she's never been defeated in the witch trials, and the witch trials are kind of pointless if she enters them because of how good she is, she's still just kind of a petty, normal-ish person underneath it all. He's like, he gets put out when her friend gets something named after them and she doesn't.
It
That
has
kind
a it has a tone that kind of reminds me of movies, cool movies in the 80s. Like they were kind of like proto superhero movies. There was like a talking mannequin or a guy who could hack into the Pentagon. And yeah, it feels like if this was longer, it could be a popcorn summer blockbuster.
yeah, I don't disagree. I would be, yeah, just from a tonal point of view, for sure. Yeah, that slightly fish out of water thing as well. That situation that gets slightly beyond the main character's control, like you say, like Ghostbusters, like Mannequin. Uh, yeah, I think it's definitely well within that world, and you can see certainly in your mind's eye those scenes of Granny just trying to do good, and it just all becoming completely chaotic. Like you can see that sequence in a movie for sure, and just some of the stuff like the jam that she makes that is like impenetrable, and the pies and stuff. Like you get some strong visuals there too. I think
And
really funny
the
stuff.
question raises itself, and I can't remember if I've answered this for me, but do you think Granny knew the reaction she'd get from being nice?
Yes, I think. I mean that is ultimately the question that the ending poses. I think, but I think if we know anything about Granny Weatherwax, I mean the story straight up tells us, even if we don't know anything about Granny Weatherwax, is that she always wins the trials,
Right.
and she's so good. She's so good. that she wins the trials even when she doesn't enter the trials. If she doesn't enter the trials might as well not exist, right? That to me is the kind of the thesis of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I suppose maybe you could question whether she does that intentionally or whether it's just innate. But I don't think Granny ever does anything unintentionally.
Right. I think she did probably know. She has that good understanding of people's psychology, that
Mm,
headology of how people behave when somebody around them, their behavior changes so radically.
hmm hmm I mean, I think she's totally committed to it because if she doesn't totally commit to it, it won't work. And that's why everybody thinks she's just doing it as a ruse because she's really planning something else. But like the real ruse is that she has to commit to it 100% or more, otherwise it won't work. People won't be unsettled by it if they think it's there's a chance that it's all just fake. The chance that she is genuinely trying to be nice is what's so unsettling, I think, for the people. you
Do you
know?
know, I'm reminded of an event in my own life about 20 years ago.
Oh yeah.
Fellows hang out with Neil and John. Neil was a hello, Neil, if you're watching somehow. Um, Neil was a blabbermouth, just like me, and he loved to poke and troll me. And one day, after so much of Neil telling me to shut up and keep my gob shut, I did, and I kept really quiet, and I said nothing. And we'd meet up each day and just hang out, sit on the couch together, have a smoke, watch TV. For 3 days, I said nothing. I gestured, waved, sometimes I mouthed, but no sound or nod or whatever. And this drove Neil up the wall. It was absolutely hilarious. And John, who was much more laid back and not so bothered, he was enjoying it too. But I could tell by the end he was a bit exasperated.
Yeah.
Oh, I got such a kick out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's something straight out of a parable or like a fable, I guess, that like be careful what you wish for kind of thing, where like, yeah, Andy talks too much, I wish he would shut up. Like Granny Weatherwax is too good at magic, I wish he would enter the magic competition. It's actually, yeah, it's very old school kind of mythological storytelling in a way, isn't it? Like that really simple proposition, which is just be careful what you wish for. And there's a lot of fun to be had with that in so many contexts, as you just described. So how long did you last? Was it just 3 days or?
Oh, 3 days, yeah. I felt like
Yeah,
it went on a bit longer.
it's impressive, I have to say. Yeah, that's some top quality trolling right
That must
there.
have been 20 hours in somebody's company.
Yeah, wow, impressive stuff. You got a bit of the granny weatherwax in you as well, obviously. Then, Andy. So yeah, this was a good one for me. I think as probably the last time I'll ever read a Granny Weatherwax story that I'd never read before. It was quite profound for me in that respect. In a way, not to make like, oh, not to make it about me or anything like, but I mean, just the fact that, yeah, that's the last time I read anything new about that character, and it was the whole story was about that character stepping outside themselves and essentially trying to be something that they're not, or at least pretending to be something that they're not was quite interesting, and I think that for me made the ending all the more satisfying because she wasn't up to something. She was just purely trying to do what she'd been asked to do, and with the knowledge that it would ultimately work out in her favor, the way that she always knew it was going to work out, and that the main purpose of the witch trial, which was for them all to kind of get together and sit around a fire and tell stories and be social, like that outcome still came to pass, and that was really satisfying. I thought that, yeah, it really worked, and just that added bit of context for me, I think, really elevated it.
And just hearing you talk that way about that, it reminds me that the witch trials are like this community event in a small place like Lancre.
Mm,
It's kind of like a big deal. And it's
mm.
for the people of Lancre. And actually in that it's only right that Granny is included because she's so much a part of it.
Yeah, exactly right. And so much of this is based on, I think, Terry's sort of slightly idyllic version of English country life, or kind of UK/Ireland country life, where the village communities have these specific dates in their calendar for things like this, for various festivals and traditions. And I think those things obviously mean quite a lot to Terry and the way that it comes through and the way that he writes about them. And, we'll probably end up, we're looking at a big tradition in our next one. We'll be looking at Hogfather, which is obviously a metaphor for various winter festivals. And the fact that this story was kind of written around the same time or a bit after probably says something about where his head was at around that time, in terms of thinking about
It
these
very
things.
much has a sort of Mayday, Halloween, Guy Fawkes kind of
Yeah.
thing. So it's kind of right that we're talking about it now.
Yeah, maybe we should just bend our original motivation for doing this and just say it's Halloween. This is our Halloween one, and then
It's
we'll do our Christmas one.
what it
Yeah.
calls synchronicity. Is that what Deepak Chopra calls it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes, we're synchronizing all over the place here. Uh, but yeah, it does have that vibe, and those kind of, especially because there's witches involved and stuff, and a lot of those traditions that have been exported globally, originated here on the island of Ireland. So that's always kind of a special time for us. Although my daughter, man, she's dressing up as Hermione Granger for Halloween.
She's dressing up as
Hermione Granger from Harry Potter.
ah.
Yeah,
I
it
thought that
just
was like a new Power Ranger.
sadly not. So slightly disappointing for me. I've always been on the Terry Pratchett side of the Terry Pratchett versus J.K. Rowling debate.
I mean, obviously she can dress up as a Pratchett character. Can we do some scenes?
Yeah, well, I tried with that collection of short stories, but that was a while ago. Yeah, I think it's time to try again, maybe with some Pratchett soon. I was thinking, without getting too far ahead of ourselves, but yeah, the amazing Maurice and His Educated Rodents was recently adapted for the screen, which we might have to give that a go soon.
Yeah,
So
it's good.
yeah,
See you in a few years for that one.
well, we'll see. Yeah, well, but yeah, by the time we get there, certainly. So you went a bit extracurricular, and I went and read the deleted scenes, which I didn't do. I didn't realize they were at the back of the book.
Should
Do you want
we
to tell us a little
should
about
we
the?
do the deleted scene? I don't want to spoil you.
Well, I was going to say the same to you because what I know of this scene is that it appears in a later book, slightly.
Ah, well, there's it may be the same scene or a reworked version that appears in Carpe Jugulum.
That is my understanding. Yeah.
Um, but I'm just going to go in if I spoil PJ. He's been given an exit. Do you want to take your exit, PJ?
No, no. As I say, I mean, I know I've read a version of this scene in another book, so I don't feel. Uh, Although I did just get all misty-eyed about like, oh, the last Granny Weatherwax story I'll ever read, and I haven't read this specific version of this scene, but I think that's splitting hairs probably. So let's just talk about it.
You know what? That can you can come back to us. That'll be one of your homeworks for a future episode.
I feel like he's giving me a lot of homework these days.
The scene the little fish is deleted scene is maybe about 10 pages. And it's essentially, if I remember rightly, no script. Granny Weatherwax at some point in the story enters this magical cave where she can be completely alone. No telepathy, completely alone with herself and facing her darkest side. And she's doing this as a way to figure out what to do, how to meet this challenge that she's been faced with the witches' trials. And the sort of last third of the story is Nanny Ogg going and looking for her. It's such a lovely descriptive piece. It really has a lot of that poetic writing to it. A lot of my favorite lines from the scene Little Fishes are in the deleted scene.
Oh, interesting.
Because we're completely winging it, I don't have them to hand, which is a great idea for where you come in, YouTube commentator, Twitter person, Facebooker. Let us know your favorite lines from the Sea and Little Fishes, and
Yes.
maybe I'll post mine as well.
And worst case scenario, we'll come back to it when we read Carpe Jugulum anyway. We'll do it then.
Yeah, so it's such a lovely it's quite a darker in tone thing. It's also because it's I think the location of this cave out on the mountaintops of Lancre,
Mm.
it feels quite different from the main narrative, and I think it best as a deleted scene, certainly in terms of pacing as well. I
Yeah.
mean, this is just as tight as the main narrative. That said, if it was included, I would probably enjoy it just as much.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm skimming it here just to see if it rings any kind of bells because Carpe Jugulum is a favorite of mine, and it sort of it does. So I'll not say any more about it because the context in which it comes is different. But yeah, I agree that like the quality of the prose in particular is too good to bin, you know. And I'm any kind of extra insight into Granny's character is for me always really really welcome. I do think perhaps the argument, one of the arguments for not including it, even though you say you'd be absolutely happy if it was included in the story for real, I'm sure I would be too. But because of how kind of introspective and stuff it is, I do think it might tip the scales a little bit because if you have that real introspective time spent with Granny and then she comes out and then she just goes about being all super super nice, I think it might kind of dilute that question for us of is she doing this for real? I think if she comes out of the cave after having done all this self reflection, we might think, oh yeah, she's figured out how to win this by,
Right. It
you
might
know,
show her hand when the main narrative rests or is suspended by the bluff.
yeah. So it's a question of how far ahead you want the readers to be of the characters of the other Lanker characters who are all really confused basically by what Granny's up to. And I think the back end of the story works best if we're kind of there with him, if we're like not 100% sure, the same way that Nanny isn't 100% sure. Whereas I think this scene or this collection of scenes might tip the scale slightly. And I'm saying that just
I
haven't
think
skimmed it. So I could be
only
totally
slightly. I
wrong. But
mean, I think Terry is aware of what he's doing because we don't actually learn what she uncovers about herself and what she needs to do in that.
mm,
Um, we do know that she's meeting herself, so it's disclosing that she's having a pretty serious think about it, and we
mm.
get Nanny Ogg going to rescue her, and I think finding her unconscious and not being put down to just Granny sort of over exerting yourself, which functions as well for this adding the stakes to the main kind of.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, that is a good point. And there are sections of the story where Nanny feels a bit passive and a bit not there, and maybe that explains why he had this other little mission in mind for her that would have kind of kept her a bit more actively engaged in the plot. So yeah, I guess there's pros and cons to it. I imagine just the logistics of this being an anthology story, it was probably just cut for time rather than for any really serious editorial reasons. But yeah, do keep an eye out for it or for a version of it in future installments. I have to dig out my Carpe Jugulum. I'm pretty sure I have a hard copy. I definitely used to have a hard copy of my very own that wasn't a library book. So that would be the next. That'll be the next time we see the witches. Yeah, and it's not that long, in 4 books time. So Hogfather, Jingo, Last Continent, then Carpe Jugulum.
We even get a little mention of Hogfather or Hog's Watch Night in this, so I know it's a time of gift
Indeed.
giving.
Yeah, and I'm sure we could check Elspeth, but I don't think it's not the first mention of Hogfather or Hog's Watch in
Fourth, maybe.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's nice, like all these little
No,
folk traditions that exist in the Discworld, like the witch trials and Hog's Watch and all that stuff, just makes it feel so lived in and so real. Awesome. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's going to be a short episode because it's a short story, and there's other bigger things afoot. We're hopefully going to try and do something a bit special for the Hogfather, so stay tuned for that. I promised bit more information on my biggest plug that I've had for a while last time. I don't know whether we should segue straight into that or should we try to wrap up?
Well, I've got some pretty big news too. So
That's right. Yeah, yeah. Yours is a bit bigger actually, so I might want to go first. But yeah, so yeah, we've both been very busy as well. We've had projects launching and stuff like that, which is again why this is a little bit haphazard and a little bit shorter probably than usual. But finally, after many hints, can now finally announce that my BBC comedy short film is available on iPlayer. It's called Country Rogues. It's part of a series of BBC NI comedy shorts, so you can kind of search for it either way on iPlayer. It's also going out on BBC Northern Ireland, BBC One Northern Ireland at 11:30, I think, on the 2nd of November. So possibly might have already gone out by the time this episode airs.
we'll get
But
this out in time for Halloween, and
no,
I'll put some links up on Twitter.
yeah, that'd be great. I mean, I don't expect anybody to sit up and watch it. It's only 6 minutes long. Don't sit up until 11:30 at night to watch it. Go out live. I implore you. See if you can find it on iPlayer. Either search up comedy shorts, and if you find the BBC and I comedy shorts, we're episode 2. Or think if you search Country Rogues, the awful BBC search algorithm should still be able to find it. It's co-written by me and Owen Cleland, directed by Owen Cleland, starring the magnificent Oscar-winning James Martin of An Irish Goodbye fame. So do check that out if you can. It would mean a lot to us. Hopefully we'll get to do a little bit more with it. Maybe a sitcom, or at least a pilot, we hope, if people show it enough love. So no pressure. My dreams are riding on this. But we would love to do more.
Massive star power at the moment James Martin has, I
Yeah,
believe.
yeah. And, you know,
Award winning.
indeed, he just had a mural of him painted up somewhere in Belfast. I haven't seen it in person, but I saw photos. Yeah, and he's tremendous chap to work with, really talented, doing a lot, obviously, for the Down syndrome community here in Northern Ireland and globally. So, yeah, it would mean a lot to us if you could check that out. And so that's just a little 5-6 minute thing, almost a trifle compared to what Andy's been working on.
Oh, well, we are recording this. What day is this? Wednesday? Yeah.
It's a Wednesday, yeah.
Oh, on Monday, my new novel launched as an ebook. Yesterday, it launched as a print copy.
Woo.
I don't have one to hand, but if you're watching on video, you can look in this space here, and there will be a lovely cover by Sean Duffield. There's an introduction by YouTube comedy reviewer, legend, sensation Alison Pregler of
Awesome.
Movie Nights. And it's, a brief pitch,
What's it called? What's the title?
called Coastlines After Dark.
There we go.
It follows the adventure of Coastlines Coast Guard Mike O'Hanlon, who has formed a private detective agency with his friend or love interest, Blake McLean, and they investigate mysteries which often have things like werewolves and ghosts and cyborgs. It's kind of inspired by Baywatch Nights, which did Baywatch, is doing the X-Files now. So there's a touch of Garth Marenghi's Dark Place to it, or certainly a flavor of it, of just very bad storytelling. I had so much fun writing it, more fun than
Awesome.
any book. It's about 200 pages, but you can clear it in, according to Kobo, you can clear it in about 4 hours. It's
There you go.
on Amazon, it's on Apple, it's on Kobo. Hopefully Barnes and Noble soon. It's in Gardner's, so I think they supply Waterstones and Easons. You can order it in from them.
Very good.
And lots of places, Smashwords, and forget all that DRM nonsense.
Yeah, that's awesome. So obviously you got the right audience here, people who are into kind of genre, comedy, pastiche, parody. We were just talking about 80s humor earlier, so obviously we got hopefully some listeners who'll be into that. I think yeah, it sounds awesome. I'll have to add it to my list for sure.
And it's a perfect Halloween gift, or for Halloween next year, read it now and then give it to somebody else next year.
I mean, if it only takes 4 hours, like you got time. You definitely got time. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, congrats on the launch. And yeah, great. Good times. So I don't know, maybe will we keep our Hogfather plans under wraps for now, just in case we're not able to deliver on them, but hopefully we will be able to. Uh,
We want to thank a few people.
oh, of course,
My
as always.
patrons, well, all my patrons really, but specifically Artemy Kondratev, Arslan Hydrali. We'll be hearing from him in a couple of episodes' time.
Exciting.
And Ian Lawler, who goes halfers on the Zoom bill, which is a pretty big bill. So thank you, Ian, for that. Totally worth a shout out each episode.
Always. Looking forward to, Andy, just give the game away a little bit on some future stuff. But yeah, we're going to maybe have a little guest contribution coming up. We're hopefully going to maybe do something a bit special for Hogfather as well. So yeah, stick with us. We appreciate, it's a long series. We're going to try and keep things interesting, make things up a little bit every now and again. Hopefully you guys are cool with that. If you're not, obviously let us know, blame us online, and we will, like Granny Weatherwax, completely change our way of doing things until it unsettles you to the extent that you let us go back to doing exactly what we want.
Absolutely. So for the time being, we are on Twitter, Facebook, at I've never read Discord or Discord GNU, probably the latter. What a good handle, GNU.
That's it. Yeah, I'm surprised we were able to secure that handle. So there it is. Yeah, you'll find us on Twitter and Facebook under that, and on YouTube as well. I think that's it.
That's it. Right, you're free to go.
Yeah, well done. Go read Troll Bridge is something that we are, another short story that we are going to look at, just in case you're wondering if you're reading along with us. And we can't expect everybody to read every Discworld short story, because I haven't even done that. But if you are interested in doing another short story with us in a little while, Troll Bridge is another one that we're going to look at. So you can add that to your reading list and your watch list. We're going to look at the fan film as well, Andy. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. I've already seen it, so no spoilers, but you should see it too if you haven't already.
Yep. So we're going to be talking about the story and the film, hopefully when we get around to that, which is a little bit TBC. So you've got time to add it to your own list if you want to come along with us for that one. But next time next time you hear us, we'll be talking about Hogfather.
Take care. Thank you.
Until then, bye bye.